Oregon's been one of the most consistently good teams in the Pac-12 for a long time, really, definitely the last several years. Won a couple of Pac-12 titles, has played for some more, multiple New Year's Six bowl game appearances. A lot of talent on the roster. They've recruited pretty well, generally speaking. But a lot of changes heading into 2022. Of course, an entire new coaching staff. Mario Cristobal, previous head coach, is now departed for Miami, and Oregon brings in Dan Lanning, former defensive coordinator under Kirby Smart at UGA, fresh off a national title there for Dan Lanning. Lots of changes on offense. Most of the defense comes back intact from last year. In today's video, we're going to take a look at Oregon's 2022 schedule, and I'm going to give you a game-by-game prediction. We're also going to talk a little bit about that offense and that defense and try to figure out exactly how good Oregon can be in 2022. I've got them ranked in the top 10 in my top 25 ranking. The coaches poll, which just came out yesterday, had Oregon, I think, at 12. So, the consensus is that Oregon is going to be a pretty good team again in 2022. Let's start off by talking about the offense. Now, they got to replace the quarterback, right? Anthony Brown, I believe was his name. He's gone. Kind of up and down. Oregon was really good last year. They were a running team. I mean, you go back even to watch that week 1 game where they beat Ohio State. They just ran it down their throat, right? They were a running team last year. Anthony Brown, he's gone. So Dan Lanning has brought in Bo Nix, a transfer from Auburn, a 3-year starter at Auburn, started as a true freshman, has been their starter for the last 3 seasons. He was injured a little bit last season, sat out some towards the end of the year. But he's there for 3 years, played a lot, and now he's going to be the man at Oregon. It looks like they do have a former 5-star recruit, Ty Thompson. Dan Lanning hasn't named a starter, but I think everybody assumes it's going to be Bo Nix, at least to start the season. We'll see how he does. If he struggles, maybe Dan Lanning looks to make a change and give the young kid, the 5-star, an opportunity. But I would be surprised if anybody other than Bo Nix starts the game week 1 for Oregon at quarterback. Speaking of Oregon being a running team, both their running backs from last year are gone. C.J. Furdell has gone off to the NFL, and Travis Dye, I believe was the other one's name. He transferred actually to Southern Cal. So you're going to have some young running backs at Oregon trying to fill those shoes from last year. So new quarterback, 2 new running backs. The good news is almost the entire offensive line is back from last year. And that's the biggest difference to me. When you look at Oregon now versus where they were at under Chip Kelly, a lot of similar records, right? Chip Kelly had them winning 10-plus games a year. Really, really good. Been 10, 12 years ago. But those Chip Kelly teams were not built like the current Oregon teams are built. Not all 10-win teams are built the same, right? There's, there's more than one way. There's more than one way to do things, right? Chip Kelly had a smaller offensive line, lots of fast, shifty players, run 100 plays a game, that kind of thing. You needed smaller offensive lines to be able to do that. They had to be able to get them off the ground quick, get lined up for the next play. And as good as those Chip Kelly teams were, when they played some of the better teams across the country, they really struggled on the line of scrimmage. In fact, Oregon got dominated along the lines of scrimmage several times against some prominent SEC opponents under those Chip Kelly days. LSU and Auburn kind of pushed them around in a couple of games there back when Chip Kelly was there. It's not the case now for Oregon. Oregon has got some beefy offensive linemen, multiple NFL draft picks on this offensive line. There's at least 2 on this offensive line. They're going to be playing on Sundays for sure. So Oregon's got a legitimate offensive line, and they return a lot of talent at the receiver position. Now, a lot of their receivers are young, but they're talented. I'm trying to think of the one. What is that receiver? Is it Troy Franklin? I believe, big, tall guy, kind of a deep threat guy. The slot, Chris Hudson. You've got a lot of wide receivers, but the tight ends are really good too. I wonder, Dan Lanning may run an offense similar to what Kirby's been running at Georgia over the last few years. Georgia, of course, has got several great tight ends, and you see 2, sometimes 3 tight ends on the field at the same time for UGA. I could see Oregon doing something similar to that. Of course, it helps with the run game. Tight ends generally are better blockers than wide receivers, and Oregon's got some really good tight ends that can also make plays in the passing game. I think Oregon's offense is going to be okay. Of course, it's all going to come down to the play of the quarterback, which, like I said, I'm assuming is going to be Bo Nix. Bo Nix was okay at Auburn. He was never really great. He was never really terrible. He struggled against Georgia, which, of course, is Oregon's week 1 opponent, but a lot of people have struggled against Georgia's defense. That's not necessarily a knock on Bo Nix, but he has struggled against Georgia in 3 starts versus Georgia. He's failed to score over 20 points in all 3 games. I think in the teens and in single digits, even in his 3 starts against Georgia. But like I said, a lot of teams have struggled to do that. Oregon's offense is going to, the quarterback play is really going to dictate how good Oregon's offense can be, I think. I'm not sure if they'll be as good of a running team as they were last year, losing those 2 running backs, Verdell and Travis Dye. The offensive line is probably going to be better. I mean, they were really good last year, and now they're even, 1 more year's worth of experience. I would expect Oregon to have probably the best offensive line in the Pac-12. When you look over on defense, they've got some real potential superstars over there. I know they lost Kayvon Thibodeaux, a first-round draft pick in the NFL, and he was all-world. There's no doubt about it. He was one of the all-time greats at Oregon. But you got Sewell and Flo, the 2 linebackers there now that were all-world coming out of high school. They've played okay. They should both have breakout seasons this year, trying to prove to the NFL that they're the real deal. In the secondary, lots of experience. You brought in a few transfers too to help you there. I think Oregon, again, is going to be pretty good defensively too. I think Oregon is a legitimate top 10 team heading into 2022. The Pac-12 now has done away with divisions, right? So Oregon doesn't have to worry about winning the North. They just have to be one of the 2 best teams in the Pac-12, right, to make it to the Pac-12 title game. Let's pull up Oregon's schedule, take a look at it, and see what they might be able to do for 2022. Now, unfortunately, as good as I think Oregon is, I just tell you right off the bat, I don't think they're winning week 1. This is really a difficult spot for Dan Lanning. It's his first ever game as a head coach. He's got to travel all the way across the country from Oregon to Atlanta, Georgia to take on the Bulldogs. Technically, it's a neutral site game in Atlanta. It's an hour away from Athens. It's basically going to be a home game for Georgia, at least in terms of atmosphere and crowd. Probably be 80 or 85% Georgia fans at that game, and Georgia's a top 3, 4, 5 team in the country right now. Very tough spot for Dan Lanning and Oregon in week 1. Lots of new faces on offense, at least at the skill positions with the 2 new running backs and the quarterback. And, it could take a while for them to sort of gel and come together. And unfortunately, you don't really have time to wait when you have a team like Georgia that you have to face week 1. Obviously, I'm a Georgia fan. I do think Oregon's a good team. There are not very many teams in America that would be able to beat Georgia in this scenario here. And unfortunately for Oregon, I think they take a loss in that first week. Georgia's currently a 17-point favorite in that game, so the majority of people are leaning Georgia there. I think Oregon starts 0-1. Now, you have a couple of non-con games here back-to-back, both at home, Eastern Washington and BYU. I think you'll beat Eastern Washington, clearly. That game shouldn't even be a contest. Now, this BYU game could be tricky. I do think BYU is a pretty good team heading into 2022. I have them ranked within my top 25. The coaches left them out of their top 25. I have them, I think, 20th or somewhere around there in my top 25. They won a lot of games last year. They've got a ton back, especially on offense. But they should not be competing with a team like Oregon, in my opinion. As good as BYU has been over the last few years, if you go back and look, anytime they've played legitimate competition, they've struggled. And by legitimate competition, I mean top 10, top 15, top 20-ish type teams. BYU has struggled. I think that will be the case again. BYU's got a tough early season schedule. I think they play Arkansas early in the season. Now of course, this Oregon game. I think Oregon gets the win against the Bicycle College. I think y'all beat BYU. You're 2-1 to start your season off. 3 non-con games in a row. You go 2-1. Your only loss to a top 3 Georgia team in Atlanta. And then you start your conference schedule, again at home against Stanford, one of the worst teams in the Pac-12 last year. I don't expect them to be much better this year, unfortunately. I'm a David Shaw fan, but he seems to have really lost it over the last few years at Stanford. I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals find themselves looking for a new coach here pretty soon. I think Oregon gets the win, starts off 1-0 in conference. Then you go on the road and play Arizona. If Stanford's not the worst team in the Pac-12, Arizona is. You couldn't get to really 3 easier conference games to start your schedule than Washington State, Stanford. Did I skip over Washington State altogether? I think I might have skipped Washington State. You'll win on the road at Washington State. I don't know how I skipped over that. 3-0 in conference, 5-1 overall heading into your bye week. These are 3 bad teams, Washington State, Stanford, and Arizona. You should win all 3. 5-1 heading into the bye week. Come out of that October 22nd. You host a pretty good UCLA team there. 8-win team last year. Chip Kelly's got all his own players in there now. And I think UCLA is going to shock some people this year. they're not a playoff team. They're not even making the Pac-12 title game. I guess what I mean is I think UCLA is going to beat one of the teams that people consider to be the cream of the crop in the Pac-12, right? When you listen to people talk about the Pac-12 this offseason, they're really talking about three teams: Utah, Southern Cal, and UCLA. I think they're going to beat one of those teams. I don't think it's going to be Oregon. You get them coming off of a bye week here. Bye weeks are always important. With a new coaching staff, I think a bye week is even more important, right? This is one extra week that all these players on the team are going to get to absorb Dan Lanning's system, philosophy, playbook, all that kind of thing. I think Oregon comes out of the bye week set up for a strong second half of the season. They start that off with a win at home against what I think will be a pretty good UCLA team. You have to go on the road back-to-back weeks. Cal and Colorado, win and win. Colorado, again, a very disappointing team over the last several years. Cal, most people forget they even have a team. A team as good as Oregon, as talented as Oregon, as deep as Oregon, should not be struggling with any of those teams. I think you get the win both at Cal and on the road at Colorado. In a rivalry game here at home against Washington, I think Washington's in for a rough season this year. And I had somebody tell me the other day they think Washington is a sleeper in the Pac-12. If they're a sleeper, I'm hibernating. I don't see it at all. I think Washington is a borderline bowl team in 2022. I think 7-5 is probably about the best they could do, and Oregon should not be losing to any 7-5 teams. I think you get the win at home, big advantage in this game, played at home against Washington. And then you have what is, without question, your second most toughest game on your schedule, home against Utah. I think Utah is a legitimate top 10, possibly even top 5 team heading into 2022. I mentioned that I had Oregon ranked 10th in my preseason ranking. I have Utah at 4th in my preseason ranking. This is going to be a great game. I'm looking forward to this one already. Now, I've already done a Utah version of this video, so if you've seen that video, you know which way I go here. I think Utah gets the win. They've got stability at the coaching staff, a coaching staff that gets the absolute most out of that talent every single year. And just to be honest with you, I've seen Bo Nix play a ton. I'll take Cam Rising, quarterback of Utah, over Bo Nix in this matchup here. I think Oregon drops its second game of the year, its first conference game of the year, at home against Utah. And then I do think you'll beat Oregon State at the end of the year, another team that I think Oregon State may end up being a little bit better this year than people are giving them credit for in the offseason. But again, not good enough to beat Oregon. I have Oregon at 10-2 with only one conference loss. I lost to Georgia in the non-con to kick things off, neutral site game in Atlanta week 1, and then a loss late in the year at home against Utah, probably with a rematch against Utah in the Pac-12 title game. Of course, that would be sort of a similar scenario to what we saw last season. Oregon and Utah played late in the regular season. Utah beat you. Rematch in the Pac-12 title game in which Utah won again. So, we'll see how it goes this year. But if things play out the way I think they will, we're going to get to see Oregon and Utah play twice again in 2022. All right, I appreciate you watching. Let me know what you think down below. Where was I right? Where was I wrong? And I'll see you again real soon. Have a good morning.